Hello, and welcome to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. This is our writing week where we get to have so much fun with the end of the month and how we get to put all of these ideas that we've been working with all month long together on the paper. And Victoria teased us with some really fun stuff last time. I can't wait. Victoria?
Okay, so when we're writing, we're asking questions, whether you're working on a scene, you're working on a character, whatever problem you're working on, as the author, you're always asking yourself questions. So when we talked about narrative distance and what that means, I gave you several examples, including spatial, temporal, and so forth. So what kind of question could you ask yourself in order to start drafting out some ideas playing with narrative distance? Well, what if we go back to the original 5 reporter questions? Come on, say it with me. Who, what, when, where, and why? You can apply that to a narrative distance exercise and easily figure out from what distance you want your reader looking into the story. So let's break it down quickly. For the first one, the who. Remember in our example from week 2, when I told you you have a difference between whether you're using a formal or an informal name for the character? That gives the reader distance from that person. So if you are referring to your character as Joseph, that's the formal version of his name. Your character is going to have some distance there. But if you're instead calling him Joey, totally different feel. You're much closer to that little character Joey than you are to Mr. Joseph. So that's one way to do it, is simply who are you talking about and how are you breaking that down using referring to them. So play with that. Play with a formal versus an informal way of gauging distance for the reader. The second one is what. What is simply description. It's exposition. How are you describing what's happening in the scene? Are you focusing in close focus on the details, or are you zooming out into more of a panoramic view of an assessment of what's going on? So what is simply how close in focus or how panoramic out are you when you're talking about the scene? When. We talked about this one when we talked about temporal distance. That's simply playing with time. You can have the thing you're writing about take place now, which is in the present, in the moment. Your reader's very close to it because we're here, we're in it. Or you can have it take place then, which is maybe a flashback or a memory. In some way, you're giving distance because you're sending it back in time or even forward in time. You could flash forward instead of flashing back. All things you can play with in your exercises. The fourth one is where. So you can play with distance in how you describe the where of a scene or even of your story. If you just say, in the country, stray cats were common. Okay, we don't know which country. We don't know what the scenario or the scene is. We just know that we're in the country and there's strays. Doesn't tell you much. There's a whole lot of narrative distance to play with there. However, if instead you write your where as behind the hay wagon, Joey scooped up the barn cat and scratched its ears. We're there. We're behind the hay wagon. It stinks. Joey's somebody that's familiar to us, and he's scooping up a cat to scratch it and love on it. Something happening very close there. So play with that narrative distance and figure out what experience do you want the reader to have, and then use the distance to achieve that. Finally, we've got the why. The why of a story often starts with emotion. Now, let's think. What is a satisfying and effective way to play with the emotion of a story? I'll give you a hint. It's the character traits. So as we segue into Kathleen's section, I want you to think about how can you use the character trait in order to describe a state of emotion or a state of being. It's either how the character's feeling and what the reader's perception of that is, or how the character is existing, how they're taking up space in the scene and what the reader's perception is of that. And I guarantee if you mess around with the character traits long enough, you're going to learn how to show the why of what this character's doing to the reader using close or further away narrative distance. So with that, I'll tell you, lean into your 5 questions, figure out how to answer them, and I'm going to throw it to Kathleen for her segment.
Oh boy, oh boy. What an interesting way of thinking about it, because we can all rattle those 5 questions off on our fingers of our hands. And so that gives us a really interesting way of taking a look at the way to handle many, many different thoughts and many different topics. Certainly narrative distance works, but you can actually use those questions from many areas to give you sparks to start going with your creative energy. Well, we're going to be talking about courtesy, of course, and I'm going to sneak in a little segue here that wasn't planned, because Victoria talked about the emotions, and I haven't said too much this month about the emotions that are associated with courtesy. So I'm going to fold that in a little bit before I give you my writing assignment. And that is that one of the challenges that we have with writing with emotion, which of course is the title of my book, is that the emotions of the victory state and the emotions of the loss state get really muddled across the different character traits. When you think about it, when people's traits are in the wing position, you get chaos, you get confusion, you get anger, you get depression, you get disappointment, you get a whole lot of negative emotions that blur together across a whole constellation of different character traits. They all share so many of these negative emotions. Likewise, with the positive emotions, when things are anchored or base, you get things are peaceful and calm, things are pleasant, things are joyful, things are smooth, and you get a whole bunch of positive emotions come in, and they get all mixed up, and you can't tell one character trait after another. What made the character feel so joyful? We haven't said too much about courtesy, because courtesy really does play deeply into that general state. When people get in the habit of being grumpy, and you can have it in a family, you can have it in an office, you can have it in just about any place where people habitually get together, they can get in grumpy states. And when people are grumpy with one another and discourteous, it's just gravelly and unpleasant to be in that kind of an environment. Likewise, when people are nice and smooth and pleasant and kind to one another, you can relax, and the whole mood and functioning just starts smoothing out. And so courtesy sets this emotional tone in your story. So think about courtesy as being either a soft, cuddly, comforting blanket that surrounds your characters and helps them feel at peace and secure. Or you can contrast that with throwing them into a gravelly environment where people are crappy to one another and narky and come up with these fiery comments, and whoever has the snappiest comeback to put the next person down. That gives you a whole different jarring viewpoint. So that becomes a whole thing that you can start playing with. And I haven't even gone into how you could take those two moods and then contrast them with the narrative distances that Victoria's been talking about all this month. So pardon that segue before I get into what your actual writing assignment is this month for courtesy. Now, courtesy isn't the kind of a thing that's a big event driver. You think of your story and plot, where does courtesy fit into a plot? How can courtesy be any kind of a pivotal moment at all? Well, if you think about it, it can be. And that is your assignment for this month, is that what I want you to do is to think about where a courteous moment, or the lack thereof, turns out to be a trigger for something that changes direction in your story, throws things out of place, or smooths the way for your character and helps them achieve the next step that he needs to achieve, or where maybe one of your characters has to figure out that this guy is not somebody you want to be nice to. It's time to stand up to that guy and be a little bit discourteous right now, because he deserves it and he needs a talking to. That is your writing assignment for this week. So I want you to think about courtesy and how it can pop in a critical moment in your story and turn things up, change things around, open a door, close a door that affects the entire outcome of your story. So that's your assignment on courtesy. Anything to add, Victoria?
Oh, as always, it's fantastic. So Now I have to do the go rogue thing myself, because as I was listening to you, it occurred to me emotion is another on its own powerful determiner of narrative distance. Think about, as a bonus, we'll call this a bonus writing exercise. Think about the difference between, as a reader, when you read a scene that is high in tension or aggression or anger. Think about how that makes you feel versus when you read a scene or a character who is calm and centered and level-headed. One pulls you in, one pushes you away. So emotion is yet another way to anchor into narrative distance and manipulate the distance that the reader wants to be from the story. Because if you deploy it right, think about every scary movie you've ever seen. Something about the tension or the suspense reels you in, and you find yourself wondering and questioning, and then comes the jump scare. Well, you can do the same thing in any genre. So that's my bonus. Think about how you can use emotion in order to manipulate distance with your reader and play with it on the page. You never know what you might find out. Kathleen, if people want to share with us, where might they find us?
They would come on over to LiLLiPub.org. LiLLiPub.org is where we hang out when we aren't busy in YouTube land. If you join us, only $8 a month, you can come join our group, and we have a writing group every Saturday. We talk about the things that we've written, and we help each other make progress, and we are seeing some real growth in the writing of the people who participate regularly in LiLLiPub. And if you think about this, I'm taking writing lessons. Yeah, what's the cost? $8 a month. What? For writing lessons? Are you kidding me? So come on over to LiLLiPub.org. You probably know that Victoria's book is going to be out soon. So if you want to get in the inner circle before it turns into a crowd scene, come on over to LiLLiPub right now. See you there. Bye-bye.